Good morning and welcome to Mobility Magic on a Monday with me, Simon Page, at 11:30 on a Monday. We're bringing you some Mobility Magic. So if you're just joining us, if you're just tuning in, you know the score. We are doing some mobility. So you need a lacrosse ball today. I have a chair as well. You may also need a towel towards the end, and of course you might need a foam roller as well. So make sure you have all your tools ready to go. We're doing a little bit of work on some hamstring, some hip, and we'll start with the feet today as well. So a little bit of feet love as well. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome, and great to see you. We have some new members, I believe, and again we're doing a little bit of hamstring work. We're doing a little bit of work with the feet as well. So welcome if you're joining us for the first time. If you're joining us again, if I know you, if I don't, welcome. You're all welcome here for Mobility Magic. So gonna give about 20 more seconds. We're gonna switch off the comments. We're gonna get straight into it. And who do we have that's new? I have a few familiar faces. Bobby, Karen, and a few others. Excellent. So I'm just gonna turn the comments off. As usual, they provide a little bit of distraction for me. And if you have any feedback, any comments, anything you'd like us to cover or for us to cover in our sessions, feel free to leave it in the comments of the videos we post after the session. We put those up straight afterwards. They go on the Instagram live feed, stay up for about a month or so, I believe, and then we take them down. And then obviously new content comes every week. Otherwise, we'll try and cover off what you need us to cover. So the first thing we're going to do, as always, is we're going to start with feet. So if you're new, you can place your crossball on the ground. You can also do this with a bottle or an empty drinks container or something that has a little bit of rigidity or a little bit of give. And we're going to start with a little bit of movement just to see what is restricted on the bottom of our foot. That's a really kind of the end point for where a lot of restrictions get kind of tied together, kind of the end of our fascial lines as well. And they all tend to kind of congregate at the bottom of the feet. So if you can loosen up your feet first, often some of the issues that fall further up the chain will loosen up. And because we're focusing on the feet, the hamstrings, a little bit of low back today, seems like a really logical place to start. So first thing we're going to do is gentle roll, about a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in terms of pressure, because we want to have a system which is going to be relative to you. My 10 will be different to your 10 in terms of pressure, so let's just say a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in terms of pressure. No pain, just a mild discomfort, and we are going to bring our toes up to the ceiling. We're going to pull our toes down to the floor, so we scrunch them up a little bit. We'll bring them up to the ceiling, down to the floor. If they start to loosen up already, you can add a little bit more pressure. If they're not loosening up, then obviously be gentle. We don't want to bruise our feet. We just want to release them as much as the body's willing to let go. So we're going to bring our toes up to the ceiling. We're going to bring it down to the floor. I'm about the middle of my foot right now, so just below the middle toes on the knuckles. Bring it up, bring it down. Take as long as you need to. So if you feel you need to, if you're watching this on replay and you feel you need to pause this, or you feel like you have more opportunity, feel free to do this afterwards too. We are going to do a little bit of mobility directly with the feet. So if you're a bit weirded out by some middle-aged guy touching his feet, sorry about that, we are going to do it, we're going to get into it. And then we're going to help you move around a little more comfortably. If you are cool with it, then we'll get into it in a second. So let's finish on our right foot. My right foot, probably your left foot. We're going to switch over to the left foot. Again, not too aggressive, about 6 or 7 out of 10. We're going to roll our feet, so balls on the floor. Rolling the feet, just a little bit. We're going to start at the base of the big toe this time. We're going down, so we're scrunching our toes up. We're coming all the way up, so spreading and splaying our toes as best we can, trying to get that tightness on the foot. Now, if you have been wearing business dress, tight fitting shoes for a while, you probably notice your feet feel a little bit different, less restricted. It's a really great time to start to open up our feet a little bit, get rid of some of those restrictions, restore some correct movement back in those feet, those toes. And if you're not already wearing some barefoot minimalist shoes that really help to fix issues with the shoes, a really great time to switch over, because it's really going to help with your posture, your walking gait, your movement, your running, your low back, etc. And also, if you've been sat around a lot, this can also be helpful. So again, move to the middle of your foot this time, below the toes. We're bringing our toes up to the ceiling now. This is not the only thing we're going to do. If you're tuning in and you're wondering what we're going to cover today, we're going to do a little bit of feet and hamstrings. We're just starting off as usual with a little bit of a touch in with the feet, as this is where we're going to spend some of our time today. So let's just get rid of our lacrosse ball temporarily. We'll need that shortly. We're going to grab a chair. We are going to start with a little bit of a nerve floss for the lower body, and then we're going to come back. We're going to do some ankles, some hamstrings, etc., etc. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to extend, okay, and flex our knee, and at the same time we're going to be looking up and down. So as you bring your head down, we're going to keep our knees together, and as you bring your head up, we're just flexing or extending our leg away from us, like you're doing a leg extension, okay? So try to keep your foot, you can even press it along the floor with a little bit of tension, but we want to make sure that we are bringing our head up to the ceiling to do that. So down, up, bring our leg up a little bit, down, up, down, and up. And this time we're going to reverse it. So this time it's going to be a little bit more intense. Again, all we're trying to do is get that nerve to glide a little bit along the leg. There's a few different applications, there's a few different ways to do it. Pick your intensity and join in if you want to. Again, if you have any sciatic issues that tend to flare up, you can skip over this one and come back to it. We're going to do a fair amount of hamstring work, but we're flossing the nerve. So a few different ways to do this. You can bring your chest down a little bit as you extend the leg and bring it up. That's kind of a little bit more intense. We can do the opposite way, and that's looking up as you extend your leg, and then down as you bring your leg back, up and down. You do it the opposite way, so as you extend your leg you come down, but that can be a little bit more advanced. So let's do the other leg now, a little bit of a nerve floss. So again, we're bring your head down and bring it up as we extend, down, up, and down. We're just flossing that sciatic nerve out a little bit, which will allow us, hopefully, to get a little bit more out of our hamstring. Because if it could be muscular, it could be nervous system related, it could be hip imbalance, it could be stability of the hip as well. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to take our foot, we're going to work a little bit more locally to the foot. Now hopefully you can see my feet. I'll try and be a little bit side on. If this is weird to you out, I apologize, but this is essential for mobility and I'll feel real good afterwards. So fingers are going to go in between toes, okay? So we're going to interlock toes, so I'm starting with my little finger on the outside. Now when you first do this, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But bear with it. If you work with me here, I think you'll feel a lot more comfortable. We're going to interlock our toes. Okay, we're going to traction away from us. Traction away, so imagine around the corner, traction up and away, and we're going to pull around the corner. So we're tractioning out a little bit, doesn't need to be too aggressive, but enough to feel a gentle traction of the toes up and around the corner. So we're coming around, we're tractioning away and around, just getting a little bit of space in between those toe joints. And if you have any arthritis or issues with the feet, then obviously be really gentle, because this is not medical advice, this is just things that work mobility wise. So we're tractioning up and away, we are pulling our toes away just a little bit around, and now we're going to add some circles in. So we have a couple of options here. You can twist a little bit with the toes, so we're just twisting a little bit, it looks aggressive, but I'm being very gentle with my toes, not too much here. Or you could do some circles, some figure eights, that also works. Again, we're just trying to get the foot to move a little bit. And when it comes to fixing hip issues, things that travel further up the chain, this works really well, because it's the first one in contact with the ground. So, tractioning away and around the corner, that's one. We have done some figure eights, some circles, that's two. And now we're going to do a little bit of toe spreading and squeezing. So I'm going to spread my fingers, stretching my toes out, okay? Stretching my toes out. I'm now going to squeeze my fingers with my toes. This can be really uncomfortable, but works fantastically well. So if you grin and bear it for about 6 to 10 seconds. And then we're going to spread those toes again, about 6 to 10 seconds. Okay, I'm doing the express version. So if you need to come back to the video later, if you're watching our replay, feel free to pause and then watch this section again. We're going to squeeze again. Squeeze, 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 and spread. Spread, spread, spread the toes. Spread, spread, spread. And one last traction just to finish off before we switch feet. Traction up and around the corner, and then a little bit of a figure eight to finish off. Awesome. So that's one foot done. Let's switch over to the other side. Same thing again. This is where you see which hip was tighter, if you were doing your left or your right. So again, threading our fingers in between our toes. If you have gross feet, don't worry, I can't see them, so you're all good. Hopefully mine are okay, but we are going to start with a little bit of traction away from you. So that's just slight tension with my hand pulling away from it, okay? And we're gonna put our fingers in between our toes. So traction up and around, I'm pulling away and around the corner. And I'm adding a little bit of movement, just try and encourage those toes to traction out. Now, if you wear ill-fitting, tight footwear, these toes can become compressed, they can become a little bit stuck, tissue around the feet becomes a little bit immobilized, and it's just a really great way of getting that foot to work properly. So again, we've tractioned away, that's one. We've done a little bit of a circular movement, that's two. So we're adding some circles or some figure eights just into the toes, because you want your foot, as it has a lot of joints in it, to move and articulate. So we're just doing some figure eights or some circles or figure eights. Figure eights, and if you're just tuning in and you're watching some guy in a room on a chair traction his toes and move his foot, then feel free to rewind the replay and get into it. But we're mobilizing our feet right now. We're going to do a little bit of hamstring shortly, and that's two. So now number three, if you remember, we are splaying our fingers and our toes. We're spreading them first, about 6 to 10 seconds. And now we're squeezing, so let's squeeze our fingers. This could be the really uncomfortable bit, but I promise you, if you grin and bear it, it'll be really beneficial. So we squeeze, 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 squeeze. And then we're pushing down a little bit more towards the joint can also help, just to splay out a little bit more. And we're spreading, and we're squeezing. As you squeeze, 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 remember the goal here is to try and get these toes to spread a little bit, okay? So let's do one last little circle, little traction away, and let's just kind of finish with the toes there. Okay, so we're going to jump off for a sec, then we're going to come back down, we're going to do a little bit more of the hamstring. But one thing to do is to make sure that once you mobilize, you engage that area. Once you mobilize, you stabilize. So we're going to do a little bit of stabilizing now. You probably notice a little bit, if you look down at your toes, that they're a little bit more splayed, like you've got a little bit more space between toes, if you don't really pay attention to your feet. So that's awesome, because that means you can grip the ground a little bit better, you have a little bit more control. You're going to feel great. Your feet might even feel a little bit looser. You get a little bit more range in your ankles. Great. But let's do a little bit of engagement, okay? So we're going to do a little bit of rocking forward with our knee, okay? Pushing down to the ground. We're gripping the floor, okay? So we're kind of testing a little bit with our ankle range of motion, which can often improve once you kind of release that plantar fascia. And we're just slowly leaning forward. And as we get to the end range here, so I've run out of space, that's kind of the end of my ankle range of motion. It's not great, but let's see if I can improve it by digging my toes into the ground for about 6 to 10 seconds, and then just relaxing. See how that suddenly just let go there? I just got a little bit more range of motion. So I'm digging in, I'm digging in, I'm digging in, I'm pushing in, I'm pushing in, and then I'm relaxing. I gain a little bit more range. So this is important, because if you get stability in your foot after you mobilize it, goes for any joint, any movement we do, any range of motion that we gain. If we stabilize after we mobilize, you'll gain that little bit more stability. You may even gain a little bit more range of motion. So it's where the body feels comfortable. So let's just do that one more time, okay? So we're digging our feet into the floor, we're digging our toes in, really pushing in, pushing away, pushing away, pushing away, and now I'm relaxing, getting a little bit more range. I can even add one more element in here. So if I'm in on my, if I'm working the range here, I can pull myself into the range with the front of my shin, and then I can do the same thing again. Okay, so let's switch sides, and we're doing the same thing. So this is the ankle that doesn't have very good range for me. This is my right ankle. It's not as good as the other one, let's say. So let's try the same thing. So we're going to dig our toes in. So we know that we've got a little bit more of a splay of the toes. We're digging in, digging in, digging in, and then we're letting it go. I'm going to bring my body weight across my ankle a little bit more, just for effect. And we're pulling the toes down, and I'm leaning into it, and then I'm relaxing, just gaining a little bit more range. So you should see my knee just gave a little bit there. I got a little bit more range. I'm digging in, I'm digging in, I'm digging in. I'm pushing into the floor just a tiny bit, and I'm digging my toes in. So I'm kind of gripping the ground a little bit, and then I gain a little bit more range. Okay, and then if I want to, I can pull using this tibialis anterior into that angle just to gain a little bit more. So next thing we're going to do a little bit of lacrosse ball release on the hamstring. Okay, so now we've done a little bit of ankle. You might already feel a little bit looser. You might already feel a little bit more stable in the hips, and that's kind of what we want. We want to go with the low-hanging fruit first before we get local. Now, if you get any sciatic issues, I would suggest you might want to skip over this. We're looking for the sit bone, so a little bony prominence underneath your butt. If you can't locate that, it's the bit that doesn't feel very comfortable when we do this particular stretch. So, two ways of doing this. You can either sit on the lacrosse ball on the sit bone, around it, on the bit that's kind of raised and doesn't feel that great, and you can even do this application for a few different areas, or start a timer, sit on an area that feels really tight for about 5 minutes, or before that, if the muscle just relaxes and gives way. Now you might have to go about an 8 or a 9 out of 10, let's say, in terms of discomfort, but that's okay because this will work and release. And if you just tuned in, I'm sat on the lacrosse ball, and this time I can either be more proximal, so close to the top of my hamstring on the tendon, or further away depending on where you feel the restrictions. So with this one, two ways of doing it, as I said. We can lean in, add a little bit of pressure downwards to that zone that feels tension. And if you're close to the hip, you can often feel it in the front side of your hip here. And that's okay, so it's just pushing the femoral head up into the acetabulum, or the hip into the top of the socket. And as it relaxes, you should gain a little bit more range on the hamstring. It should probably act quite quickly on it if you put enough tension into it and just kind of relax. Just take a few breaths, that also helps. And it's that autogenic inhibition of the muscle which kind of relaxes it, allows it to go a little bit looser. With enough tension, it just diffuses, and then you gain a little bit more range. So as that kind of relaxes, and it will do after about a minute or two, so again, pause it if you're on the replay, we can move down and you can progressively move along the hamstring, just kind of releasing it, putting a little bit of pressure on that lacrosse ball on your hamstring. So the second variation, and we're going to do that in a second, we're going to do one more of these pressures down so you get a little bit more clarity as what we're doing. You move it to an area that feels tension and maybe a little bit of tightness in the hamstring, and apply a little bit of down pressure. So you can lean from the hips a little bit, but we don't want to add any more stretch onto the hamstring, and we're just down pressure into where that lacrosse ball is underneath the hamstring. So second thing you can do is you can actually have a stretch from the distal end of the hamstring, so that's further away, that's just extending the leg. So we've got some downward pressure, and we're extending that leg, so it's going to add a little bit more of a stretch, a little bit more of a stretch, a little bit more of a stretch, and back again. So we're not trying to tear the muscle, we're just adding a little bit of tension. So move that lacrosse ball. Now, if you don't have a lacrosse ball, I'm going to show you how to do this with a foam roller. It probably won't fit as well on my chair, but same effect. So it's going to lift the hip up just a little bit more, and we're pinning down the soft tissue. This can be good if you can't quite locate where that tension is coming from, because it will cover more of a surface area. We're applying a little bit of downward pressure, and then we're extending upwards. So you can do this on the floor as well. If you don't have any space or a chair, you can do this on the floor. And again, once you get to this end range, we can dynamically come in and out if we need to. Okay? And once you kind of get to that end range, let's say I'm stuck right here, I can add a little bit more pressure, I can hang out, and I can just come in and out that end range with that foam roller. So let's sit on the other side. For those of you that didn't have a lacrosse ball or don't have a lacrosse ball, I would suggest buying one. It's really useful. It's going to help you with these mobility sessions. A tennis ball does fine, or some sort of ball that has a little bit of give, but not, but also doesn't push back too much. So start with the proximal end of the attachment. So we're kind of around the tendon, top of the hamstring. We're not quite on the sit bones this time. We're actually working the hamstring, but that is somewhere that you can go if you have any tension in your glutes. We're more proximal to the hamstring, okay, to the tendon. We'll start in the middle, but you can do outside as well. And we're just leaning forward to add a little bit downward tension into this lacrosse ball I have underneath my hamstring. So put in a little bit of pressure downwards. You may feel a little bit of tenderness, tension. That's okay. If you hang out there for a minute and breathe into it, often it will just release. It will just autogenically diffuse, and you'll find that that muscle tends to relax a little bit. So we're going to move up a little bit more. Find another spot that you feel tension. Often it will just kind of move distal, and you'll find that once you move along the whole hamstring, it gets released. So we're just leaning forward, so stay nice and tall, lean forward, and see if sinking into that hamstring helps it to release. And then we're just going to do one more spot, and then we're going to do some pin and stretch with the lacrosse ball. So again, downward pressure, bending forward. You take a few breaths here. If you feel tight, you can pause the video. If you want replay, you can come back to this later. You can even do this on your own if you want to. You don't need me to guide you how to do it, but it can help you release some of that tension in the posterior chain during the day. So it's often good to do this during the day. So now I'm pinning down and I'm extending my legs. I'm just going to turn towards you just a little bit more. I'm extending my leg in a spot which feels particularly tight. So about there is where I feel the onset of that tension. I'm going to lean into it, put a little bit downward pressure, let it sink a little bit, and let that tissue kind of diffuse a little bit, and then I'm extending it away to get that end range. So don't be too aggressive. We don't want to bruise the muscle, because that will actually prevent us from getting the gains that we want in the end range. We actually want to make sure that we're just doing enough to gain enough range and just moving in small increments. So slow progression is kind of what we're looking for. If we gain masses and masses of end range, it's hard for us neurologically to control it. So next thing we're going to do, so we've done a little bit of work on mobilizing that hamstring. We're going to do a little bit of an active stretch, so you can do a little bit of hip work here as well. So first thing we're going to do is a little bit of rotation of the hip. I like to use a chair because it enables me to kind of open up, and it's a substitute for another exercise I like to do called a hip airplane, which we've covered before in other sessions, which we can do another time. But first thing I'm going to do is we're going to face the chair. Okay, so this is a combination of two exercises. One is a hip, one is a hamstring, and we're going to turn our body to face away from it. So my toe is pointing away from the chair, about a right angle, and I'm going to turn my toe down towards the chair. So if you don't have enough balance, you can obviously prop yourself up with another chair in front of you. But all we're doing here is we're opening up this hip socket. So the more you can stay stable in the pelvis and turn that toe down, the better. A beginner option is to turn your whole hip. But if you're able to just stay stationary and just turn the hip in the socket, in and out, that works great too. So again, all we're doing with this one is we're just lubricating the hip socket, which again will help you gain a little bit more range as it kind of desensitizes that nervy feeling that some people get around the hip socket, that restriction. And often that tightness in the hamstring, tightness around the pelvis, is just because you're compensating for something else. So if you feel tight in the hamstring, it's not necessarily a hamstring, it could be just a response your body has to kind of help stabilize the pelvis. So we're just eliminating a few really, really easy ones here by doing a rotation in the pelvis. So second thing we're going to do, we're going to turn our foot towards the foot. So now we're facing the chair, and we're just going to have a little bit of a stretch. What we're going to do is we're going to tuck the pelvis back. So we're not leaning forwards towards the foot, we're actually pushing the pelvis back, and that's enough often to get a little bit of a hamstring stretch. So we're just going to tuck the pelvis back, pelvis comes back, you should feel the onset of the stretch. If you want to add the next level, so level 2 on the stretch, you're going to pull those toes towards you. Pull those toes towards you, okay? And now you can start to slide your hands down the hips. So step 1 is to push the hips back. So pushing back, and if you have a little bit of grip on each other, it's actually better because your foot can sink into it, doesn't slide away. Second thing is to pull the toes towards you. And the third thing is to reach down. And once you get a little bit of a stretch here, you want to just hang out and breathe, and breathe, and breathe. There's no point going red-faced. That's not going to help you, because if you're turning bright red, red-faced, you're doing the opposite of what you want, and that's you are creating more tension in your body. So breathing's a big effect, has a big effect on mobility. So we're going to turn, we're going to face away with a little bit of an open hip, so a little bit of lubricating the hip socket here. So ideally we want to keep facing forward, and we're turning that hip all the way in and all the way out. But if you need to turn your hips as well, just to get that hip to start to open up, because you feel tension coming across the front, that's fine, completely fine. Again, we're just trying to get that hip to rotate in the socket, because often if you get that hip moving properly, some of these hamstring and posterior chain tightness, or some of the posterior chain tightness, could be lost and will dissipate because now your hips move just a little bit better. And often the hamstring, which gets tight just to help stabilize the pelvis, or maybe if you have some of those nervous issues we talked about earlier, they can dissipate too once you get that hip moving, okay? So now we've kind of rotated the hip, it's lubricated in the socket, we can turn back towards the chair. So my foot's on the chair, I'm shifting my hips back first, just to create a little bit of a stretch. I'm pulling my toes towards me to add that level 2 stretch, and now I'm starting to slide my hands down towards that foot for that level 3. And once I feel that stretch, I'm going to take a nice deep breath in and out. And as I take a breath in and out. And when we breathe out, that's when we want to fall into the next range. So we're going to take a deep breath in, back off slightly, breathe out, fall into the new range. And as you take deeper and deeper breaths, as you kind of work into that range, your body will naturally accept that new range if you move with the out breath. So let's just do that one more time, just so you kind of get the hang of it. So we're in range, I have my hips shifted backwards, I'm leaning forward from the waist, so I've not got an arch back, I'm nice and flat, I'm toes towards me. And now take a nice deep breath in. And as I breathe out, you should find that your body naturally starts to sink towards your foot. You get the more of a hamstring stretch. So we can do that again for you. And see how I just shifted into the new range and get a little bit more of a stretch. Okay, so we can lose the chair now. We've done some ankle work. We've done some stability for the ankle. We've done a little bit of work locally to gain a little bit more range on the hamstring. We're going to come down to the floor a little bit, do some piriformis work, and if we have time, we'll do a little bit of other hamstring PNF work. So last kind of thing we're going to touch upon, a little bit of a figure 4 stretch, which we can actually turn into a low back stretch too, but we're going to cross our legs. And you've seen me do this a few times for lower back as well, but for this application we're in a figure 4, so my leg is crossing over this time, my right is over my leg in a figure 4. I'm going to use this for a piriformis stretch, okay? So we're going to lift this leg up, we're going to wrap our hands around the lower leg, and I'm adding a little bit of traction pulling towards me, and this should actually add a stretch on the leg that's at 90 degrees. Works really, really well, but just go to where you can feel the stretch and not beyond. And you don't want to go too intense for this one. This one can be really, really, really intense very, very, very quickly. So just go with what you can. Okay, take a nice deep breath in and then go into the range. Now, if you struggle with this one, you can just rest in this position, and you can even prop yourself up. You can even do this one seated on a chair,
and slowly lower your torso forwards, and that also works effectively too. If you want to take it one step further, you can push your knee away from you, and if you want to go into your low back, you can also twist a little bit too. But for time's sake, let's just switch over, and let's bring our leg towards us in this piriformis stretch. So again, we're getting a little bit more into the glutes here, but often if you have any issues around the hips that affect your hamstring, piriformis is a good place to go, because that can add to hip tension. And again, feel free to extend this stretch if you need to. You can even traction away from you. You can rotate out for a little bit of a low back stretch. And just to quickly show you how you can apply this to the chair position, well, we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go finish it. You would get your chair position. So if you're still on the floor and you're still in that previous stretch, carry on. If you want a modification, we can even bend forward, again, shifting our weight into this position. And that's a nice, passive, easy way to add it into some of the stretches that we've already done, okay? So again, we're a little bit of downward tension, and we're bending from the waist, and you can even travel slightly diagonally, and that also helps to add in that stretch, that passive stretch. So you can do it either side. So let's do a quick check-in. Let's see how we feel. Chairs away, again, that was just for demonstration. So if you're following along, don't panic. It's just an option that you can use. Let's just see how our body feels. How do your hip feel? Which one feels better? Does your feet feel better? Do your feet feel better? Do we have a little bit more range on our ankles? Do we feel a little bit better with our hamstring? Do our low back and our glutes feel a little bit better? How do you feel? So just going to turn the comments on just for a minute. Hopefully that helped a little bit with some hamstrings, some ankles, some low back. We zoomed through quite a lot of content, so I would definitely advise you to check out the replay that I'll post straight afterwards. And if there's any issues, anything you would like us to cover, then obviously do let us know. We love to hear from you. We love your feedback, and it really helps us shape these sessions, because without you, obviously, this doesn't happen. So I want to say a big thank you to you. And obviously check out the rest of the sessions this week for other great content. So I believe it's Robert this evening with some dance, and obviously some yoga as well tomorrow, and some kickboxing as well tomorrow. So ciao for now. I will see you guys later, probably next week, 11:30. Have a great week. See you soon.